All right, well, welcome back to our Speak Life podcast. My name is Mark Mead. I'm excited to be here with you guys today, and I got my good friend, Todd Cruz. This is a man of God, full-time ministry, pastor, I would say mentor, has taught me a lot in a lot of different ways in the spiritual realms. A husband to his beautiful wife, Nicole, father to his two amazing kids, a businessman, a church planter, a great friend. And he's joining us today from Speak Life. Todd, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Super honored to be here. I love it, and just love the concept of this podcast, Speak Life. I think it's a massive need, and hope a lot of people are going to be inspired by it, those that are listening. But I appreciate you, brother, what you're doing, what you're building, and it's been a joy just to be friends with you for a long time, man. Every time we get together, I feel sharpened, encouraged, challenged, and we've had a lot of good combos throughout the years. So it's good to now do another one with a mic in front of our face.
Well, listen, man, you're one of the first people that I thought of to jump on this podcast because you're one of the most positive people that I know. And you're very insightful, very inquisitive. So, when we came up with this concept of Speak Life, sowing seeds today for tomorrow's harvest, I mean, it took us a while to kind of get here from a place of, this being a seed in the ground, right? Like it was an idea. It's kind of where I felt like my life was going. And we've obviously been on a podcast scene for years, but doing it now with the mindset of like, all right, let's sow in to people. Let's sow in the community. Let's sow into speaking life into people. It's been something we've been doing forever. We just never publicized it in such a way. So when I thought of you, I thought about everything you stand for, and all the platforms that you've kind of grace people in, whether it's a one-on-one or you talking to thousands. And, so it's a true honor to have you on here, man, as one of our first guests. And I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, no, me too. And I love what you just said about it started with a seed, because I think that's the power of, this podcast and this theme of just like sowing seeds. Because in reality, everything starts with a seed, right? And, in the Bible, you see a lot of those type of analogies with farming and seed and planting and watering, because that was the time and that was the culture of the day. Now it's like, I don't know, less than 2% of people are farmers. So it's not as relevant as an analogy.
Right.
Like somebody in the Bronx is not really vibing with what you're saying. But it doesn't take away from, I think, just the power of the analogy of, what it is that you sow, you reap, for better or for worse. I think people that don't know God would maybe call that karma. But I think people that know God would understand the kingdom principle of when you sow good things, right things, positive things, it has a way of coming back to you. And when you do the opposite, it also has a way of coming back to you, And I think it's also just the nature of, hey, we plant, we water. God has the ability to make things grow. And I think something that I've tried to say to myself, throughout the days, weeks, months, to encourage myself is not to judge a day by the harvest that you see, but by the seeds that you sow.
That's strong.
Because it's very difficult when you're kind of looking at a day or a week and you want to see the harvest.
Right.
Like, you don't see anything.
Right.
It's like, all right, let me lay my head on my pillow tonight and just think about what seeds did I sow today?
No
because
doubt.
if I actually sowed seeds, they're going to grow.
No doubt.
In my marriage, in my business, in my church, in my family, like my job is to sow seeds and believe that they're going to come up at the right time in the right way, But it takes patience.
Yes, it does, as you know. Talk to me a little about your background, like, and kind of enlighten our audience with, how you, kind of, came into ministry. What were some of your influences kind of growing up, and how did you find your way into where you are now?
Totally, yeah. So I grew up in the state of Indiana, which is a basketball state. Hoosier Nation. And basketball is like a religion in Indiana. It's like Texas football. And I grew up in a basketball family. My father was a college basketball coach, very successful in that space growing up. So grew up, going to games and in and out of seasons and stuff like that. And wasn't really religious, didn't go to church. My mom started going to a Christian church when I was a teenager, started bringing the whole family along, got serious about my faith, graduated high school, and my goal was to grow in my faith and get as far away from Indiana as possible. So
why? What was it about Indiana that?
You know what? I was just done with the cornfields. Like, I love my upbringing. I'm grateful for it, but it was kind of one of those towns that like a lot of people don't like, but nobody ever leaves.
Got it.
So I was like, man, I want to try something new. And I've always had that kind of go for it mentality. So I went to a Christian university down in Palm Beach, Florida,
Okay.
which was great. It was more like a resort than it was a college campus. Like palm trees, people wearing swimsuits to class. Like it was incredible. And the motto of the school was the deeper your tan, the lower your GPA. So every day is like, do I go to class? Do I go to the beach? Like that was the decision. But it ended up being very transformative for me those 4 years because I'm taking Bible classes, I'm taking business classes, I'm meeting people, I'm going on trips all over the world doing missionary work. And actually, I started working in ministry when I was 19 years old for the first time on a block called Tamarind Avenue. People don't realize it, but in Palm Beach, they had a very rough inner city. So they actually had
In Palm Beach.
In Palm Beach, they had I know. Because what people think of is they think of Palm Beach Island. They think of the Breakers Hotel and they think of all the big mansions.
Nice hotel.
Less than a mile away is a block called Tamarind Avenue, and at the time it had the highest murder rate per square foot in the entire country. So they had 91 murders on one block in 1 year. It's unbelievable. And we were running an after-school program on that block.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm 19 years old, running this after-school program, 91 murders on the same block in the same year.
Wow.
And then I would do
Wow, that's a crazy.
I
You would
would
think
do
of
that
Chicago or something.
I know, you would think. And I did that in the afternoon. And then at night, I would go over to Palm Beach Island, and I had a job at the hottest restaurant on the island. It was called Amici's. It was an Italian restaurant because I was friends with the owner because he was also the owner of my house that I rented from him. So I'm just a 19-year-old kid trying to make money. I'm not thinking of this, but now as I look back, you start to see how God kind of weaves in part of your purpose into your story. So I was getting used to being around people that had nothing and being around people that had everything. A lot of the money from the island funded the ministry.
Wow.
In the inner city. And I kind of had my foot in both worlds, and I've kind of known that's been a trend kind of throughout the last 20 years of my life.
That's amazing.
But I never said the words, I want to be a pastor in my entire life. I've been pastoring for the last 15 years here in the Northeast. I've never said those words. And it's interesting, even in light of Speak Life and this podcast and what it's about, because after Florida, I went up to Brooklyn and I started helping out at this church. And this older woman, kind of like a church mother, she pulled me aside one day and she goes, "You're a pastor." Nobody had ever said that, never had that thought. She's like, "You're a pastor." It's like, you talk like a pastor, you act like a pastor, you have pastoral.
How old were you
gifting.
when that?
I was 22. I was right out of college.
Huh.
And, it taught me a lesson that, to us, what might just be a passing comment could be pulling out the potential of somebody else's purpose. Like, it really is the epitome of Speak Life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I never even had the thought to be a pastor, but somebody else saw in me what I didn't even see in myself. They spoke it over me, and it ended up, coming to pass. So it's cool even to talk about this topic because it's such a personal part of kind of my journey.
Amen. So Florida now to New York?
Yep.
What inspired you to get to New York?
I read a book about a church in Brooklyn. Called the Brooklyn Tabernacle, and I just kind of read these miraculous stories of what was happening right in downtown Brooklyn. And I got out of college, and I was like, man, I want to do something. I want to make a difference, but I don't know exactly what I want to do.
Sure.
So I just kind of had the mentality of like, rather than sit around and wait around, why don't I go join something that's already going on?
That's awesome.
Wow,
so what a mindset.
I read that book.
Jeez.
I was super inspired by it. I literally got in my car, didn't go to graduation even.
What?
Skipped graduation, backpack Europe for a month with some friends.
Wow.
After Europe, got in my car, and I drove from Florida to New York in one day by myself.
Wow. By yourself.
By myself, man.
Wow.
First 15 hours of cruise, last 15 hours, I was like hallucinating. I was like seeing deer on the road that weren't even there.
Dude, it's so amazing to hear this because I've known you a long time and I've never heard this. It's funny how that works, right? Like
Totally.
You get into a booth around a topic and everything comes out, but to hear you say everything you're saying and now know you and now look, like I'm looking back at your life, I'm like, it makes all the sense in the world that you are who you are right now, dude. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, everybody has a story, right?
Yes, sir.
And like you go through life, you go through work, you go through church or whatever you do, and you don't realize the story that somebody has, the struggles that they've been through, and every single thing that they've walked through has made them who they are.
No doubt.
It really is powerful. And I think it's also the power of just asking questions and getting to know people's story and sharing your story, because I think God has a way of using your story to inject into somebody else's story in a powerful way.
No doubt.
You know,
So clearly you're on this road to help people in probably many regards, but how does your faith and spiritual beliefs influence your mindset in approaching and supporting those in need?
yeah, I think everybody's in a different spot in life, and because I'm a Christian, I follow Jesus, I follow the Bible. There's a lot of talk about people in need. You got a widow, you got an orphan, you got somebody who's hungry, you got somebody who's homeless. What do all those people have in common? Well, they don't have a lot of status in society. They don't have a lot of economic value. They don't have a lot to offer. But for whatever reason, those are the type of people that are on the heart of God. And I think there's something that happens in you when you begin to help others, right? Like, the more consumed we are with ourself, the more of a detriment it is to us. The more we get consumed with other people and helping other people. And I don't think that's just a faith principle. I think that's even a business principle. I mean, really what business is you're serving people. You're serving needs. You're meeting a need. You're adding value, And the more that you're able to put other people's needs above your own, I think it's not only, the way that God desires, but I think it ends up doing something extremely fulfilling in and of yourself, So when I'm in Palm Beach, as a 19-year-old helping kids in the after-school program, I saw what it was doing in my heart, and I've just tried to have that mindset ever since then.
When you think about something that has really moved you, what comes to mind? Like something that has moved you to continue to sow seeds at the rate you're sowing them, that continues to inspire you. What's something that has completely moved you to compassion?
It's a great question. I think seeing people that have been doing this for a very long time is moving. I'm 39 years old. You're relatively the same. I think the older that we get, the more impressive longevity is.
Yes, sir. It's so true.
I think half of life is just keep going. Just keep going, man. Like, oh my goodness. Other people are going to give up. Other people are going to waver. Other people are going to get distracted. And I think there's just real power in perseverance, and just year after year, you keep doing it. So when I see somebody who's 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old, and they're still moving and they're still making a difference, they're still serving people, they're still having an impact, their family still loves them, they're healthy, that's very inspiring to me. My wife and we have a marriage counselor, and he's about 80 years old now. And I remember he said this to me, during the pandemic. We were FaceTiming with him and talking to him, and he said, Todd, he goes, when I look back on my life, I've probably had about 7 different seasons. When I think about my life and jobs and where I've lived and different things, he goes, I've had about 7 seasons. He goes, 3 out of the 7 were bad. And he goes, if I could go back and make those 3 bad into 3 good, I would not do it.
Wow.
He goes, because those seasons made me who I am.
Amen.
And it's like, there's just something about it when somebody who's 80 years old says that to you.
That's a big deal.
You know what I mean? Like, if one of our friends says, all right, cool, man, good quote. But like, somebody who's been through 80 years of life and ministry and family and disappointment and business, all of these different things, says something that powerful, it resets your perspective. And it's like, man, that really moved me to help me persevere through, what seems like the world is crashing down on. It's okay, man. It's just Tuesday. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're going to keep moving.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's
it was
huge.
really powerful for us.
Oof. I mean, yeah, life has valleys. Life has peaks. Like what you just said, I learn a lot more in the valley than I do on the mountain. What do you do? What are some things that you do in valley seasons? What are some things that you hold on to in valley seasons?
I think you got to remember what it is that you believe. I think a lot of things come down to principles, because, if you don't have principles that you live by, you kind of operate under pressure. In the valley, there's a lot of pressure. And I think it can absolutely swallow you if you don't have a foundation of principles. You know, my principles are, I'm going to love my wife. I'm going to lead my family. I'm going to believe God. I'm going to keep doing the next right thing. I'm going to control the controllables. I'm going to trust with the stuff I'm not in control of. You know what I mean? Like, it's that thing of sowing seeds. Like, what else can I do except sow the right seeds and believe it's going to come out, you know, in the right way, you know? And I think it's tough. It's tough to have that mindset when
Yes,
you're in
it
the
is.
valley, because
Yes.
disappointment is real. You know, and there's probably people listening right now that have a lot of different disappointments, a lot of discouragements, a lot of things they're overwhelmed by, a lot of things that are dominating their mind, you know. And if you don't have the right belief system, if you don't have the right people around you, if you don't have a vision for where you're headed, then I think those valleys can really derail people, you know, in a powerful way. And that's why I think it is so important to, like I said, have those beliefs, have those people, have that bigger vision, because it's amazing what you can endure when you have hope.
That's really good.
You know, like if you don't have hope, it's almost a wrap.
Wow.
But if you have vision, if you have hope for something bigger that is ahead, it's unbelievable what you can actually press through,
Wow.
you know?
That's strong.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I've seen that even in your life and conversations we've had, and we've had a lot of these talks that don't have microphones, and they're at a diner, and it's like, hey, what are you going through? Hey, what are you going through? And it's like, there's always another thing. There's always another thing. But there's something powerful about just pressing forward and continuing. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, even about friendship and having a front row to people's lives, is like another year went by, another year went by.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Amen.
You know, we're still married. We're still trying to do the right thing. We're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
God's helping us.
Amen.
You know, it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's really good. Equally, you know, you've been on the top of the mountain. You've had, you know, king moments, you know, and, you know, how do you navigate the highs? You know, how do you find a way to either remain even keel, or how do you navigate the highs, mountaintops?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I remember about 7 years ago, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was sitting down with a mentor, and this mentor said to me, I'll never forget it. They go, one of the hardest seasons to seek God is when you're in a season of success.
Isn't that the truth?
It's so true, because like when you're in the valley, when you're going through it, it's like you're desperate. You're like, God, help me. Help me. I got no choice, but Lord, help me. You know, but when things are going well and everything is rocking and money is coming in, or recognition is coming in, or I got the promotion, or the doors are opening, or it's going better than I expected, you don't feel or sense that need for God, because it's all going well, you know? And one of the most famous sermons in the Bible, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, what does that mean? Poor in spirit simply means being dependent on God. It means having a dependent spirit, you know? And I think there's something really powerful to that in a season of success or in a season of failure, to say, hey, high or low, I need God. You know, like if you think about it, it's really powerful. Even Jesus said, I can do nothing unless the Father helps me. Like, think about that. Like Jesus, like the most powerful human being on the planet, is like, I can do nothing unless God helps me. So if he has that mentality, how much more should we kind of keep that mentality of like, man, I can't do this marriage unless God helps me. I can't do my business unless God helps me. I can't make this decision unless God helps me make this decision. I can't do this podcast because I got good things to say. Like, no, I need God's help. You know, and I think that when we have that posture and that prayer, I think God actually helps.
Right.
And I think that when we take the opposite and we're like, I got this. I've done this. I'm good enough. I'm gifted enough. I'm skilled enough. When we do that, then I think God kind of like backs off a little bit. He's like, okay,
Right, sure.
well, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
You got to
Yeah,
go.
go,
You
yeah.
know? And that's a dangerous place to be. And I think that's something we've all fallen into. I know I have myself, you know, and I don't want to be in that spot. I want to remain in a position of dependence, whether it's mountain or valley, you know?
No doubt.
Yeah.
When you think about, how long have you been married, Todd?
Almost 14 years.
Yeah, we're going. When is your anniversary?
December 5th.
Okay, so we're November 7th,
Okay.
14 years. So we're in the same, what are some some things that you look at in marriage that has allowed you to, a lot of people don't make 14 years, bro, and talk about sowing seeds. You're sowing seeds in your marriage that have gotten you a harvest of 14 years and beyond. What are some things that you see in your marriage that have really helped, bud and keep the fire burning?
Yeah. I mean, listen, we're trying to figure it out like everybody else. I mean, a couple personal things, but quick, I was preaching on the Jersey Shore many, many years ago at this church. It was an older church, a lot of gray heads in the church. And I met this couple after the service. I'll never forget because they were celebrating their 70-year wedding anniversary. 70
years.
year wedding anniversary.
Wow.
They were both in their 90s. They met at a church camp when they were teenagers.
Wow.
Ed and Shirley Berkeley. I remember their names. So I'm talking to this old couple that's been married for 70 years.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
I know, me neither. I never heard of that. And I said, listen, I mean, come on, you guys made it 70 years. Like, you got to give me some marriage advice. Like, give me some tips. And without even batting an eye, I'll never forget what the guy said. He goes, remember these three things. He goes, have the same vision, share each other's burdens, and forgive quickly. And it was so powerful to me, man. I never forgot it. It was almost 7 years ago. And he said, if you want to have a healthy marriage, if you want to have a long marriage, have the same vision, share each other's burdens, and forgive quickly. And I remember going home and sharing that with Nicole, and it really just struck us, and it's been something that we've tried to do. Like what is our vision? Where are we going? Like we're a team, we're a unit. Like we need to be aligned and unified and go in the same places, because the opposite of vision is division.
Wow.
If there's two different visions, and that's a very dangerous thing, and that happens. And you have to kind of get back aligned. And when your spouse is going through something, you need to feel that. You need to hear that. You need to talk through that. You can't brush that off. And if you've been married for more than 5 minutes, you're gonna be offended, and you're gonna be upset about stuff. So that's why this old man is saying, hey, don't just forgive, but learn how to forgive quickly, because it's probably gonna be a daily thing.
That's strong. God bless.
So we've tried to do some of those things, and a lot of practical things, like doing date nights and stuff like that. I know you and Robin are phenomenal at that, and religious with it, of just the date night and constantly even tweaking it of like, how do we do this even better, and get more synced up on a weekly basis, But I think the simple things, man, talking, looking each other in the eye, sharing each other's burdens, praying for each other, understanding the power of healthy fighting. You can't have a marriage and not fight. Conflict is a part of life, but I think there's healthy fighting and dirty fighting. I think dirty fighting is like you're trying to win, you're trying to convince, and I think healthy fighting is you're trying to understand, you're trying to find a solution, So trying to remember that when emotions are high and you're working through some hard stuff and real stuff, which every marriage has.
No doubt. Yeah, it's amazing. I watch you, as a very active and involved father in Kanan and Zoe's life, and just, watching how intentional you are about, what we feed them, mentally, spiritually. And, so when you think about that journey as a father, and I know, like, we've had some really good talks about this, and but, like, the best is yet to come. But what are some things that you're doing intentionally to sow seeds into your kids, to, like, at this stage where they're at right now, which is a very critical stage, right? I think our kids are the exact same age, like 2 years apart. And it's like the questions that they have right now and our roles as fathers is so huge. What are you doing to navigate this season to try to make the next season very fruitful for them?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I think it comes back down to vision once again, so like if we think about our kids when they're 18 years old, right? You got a boy and a girl, I got a boy and a girl. We're going to blink and they're going to be 18. So they're going to be off to college or doing whatever they do. What do we want our 18-year-old child to be walking away from us with? What values do we want them to have? What skills do we want them to have? What do we want them to know? What do we want them to believe? What do we want them to understand, right? And then I think you have to reverse engineer all that. I think that good parenting doesn't happen by default. I think it happens by design. So I'm trying to think of my son as an 18-year-old and my daughter as an 18-year-old, even though right now they're only 10 and 8, and saying, what can I do now to try to encourage and instill, some of those values? I think that as a father, there's a pastor by the name of John Tyson who wrote a phenomenal book called Intentional Father. I know we kind of talked about it, but he kind of breaks it down and say there's like 4 layers of fatherhood, right? Like there's the ignorant father who maybe just doesn't know any better or has been absent, or maybe he didn't have a father so he knows no better. And then there's the inconsistent father, the guy that's trying to do his best, but he's kind of in, out. And then there's the involved father, which is around, which is great. And then the 4th layer and the best layer is the intentional father, the one that's not just involved, but they're being intentional with the development of their children. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you and I are always talking about. We're always trying to do. We're always trying to get better at.
It's harder than it sounds.
In and of itself, like each kid is a full-time job. Man, I wish it was just as easy as just keep them fed, but it is getting more and more real by the day, but being a father is the greatest honor of my life. And, we're trying to figure it out like everybody else, but, we're trying to be intentional with raising kids that have a level of respect for people, know how to serve people, believe in God, have faith, live an adventurous life, have emotional IQ, know how to communicate, know how to resolve conflict. You know what I mean? And the family is the perfect unit to learn all of those things. Right. When you really do it the right way. So we're trying, man.
Dude, so you talk about your core family values being faith, prayer, generosity, adventure, and legacy. A lot of very strong words, very impactful vision and values. How did you come up with that, and how are you instilling that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, everyone has values. You know what I mean? I think this is so important for family because, your company has values, your church has values, the university has values. Let's be honest, the gangs have values. The Bloods and the Crips have values. So first of all, why would you not establish and clarify and communicate values for your own family if that really is the most important thing, And I think what is important to God is important to us. So we're looking at our Christian faith, we're looking at the Bible and saying, man, what's on the heart of God? And there's a lot of different values you can choose from, but I think depending on your personality, how your family is wired, different things are going to be of importance. And like I said, this is not by default, it's by design. So we try to craft those values almost right when we got married, 12, 13 years ago, and just said, hey, let's try to live out these values, and more than just having it as, a bumper sticker or something that's kind of cute and cliche. It's like, okay, let's take prayer. Let's focus on that for the month. You know what I mean? With the kids, with ourselves. What can we do, right? Let's try to do more than just pray before bed. Okay, let's try to, hey, who's a friend that you want to be praying for, right? Or what's a country you want to be praying for? What happened today that's on your heart? Let's pray for that, or let's show them what it looks like to pray for somebody that's in need when you just come across them in the grocery store or whatever.
Right.
You know
that's
what I mean?
strong.
So it's just a level of intentionality. And there's been a lot of times where, we failed or we've forgotten or we said this is our value, but it's all right, what are we doing about this?
Right.
Nothing.
Got it.
All right, now let's do something.
That's so
you know
real.
what I mean?
Yeah, that's strong.
So I think it's just more so making the decision, saying this is who we are, and trying to keep it in front of us. The Bible talks about training your children. The Bible talks about doing that when they wake up, when they go to bed, at a meal, and when you're kind of on the go, if you will. So even though the Bible kind of mentions that, it's very intentional. Morning time is intentional. Nighttime is intentional. Mealtime is intentional. When you're in the car, which here in New Jersey, you're in the car a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're in the car a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you even take advantage of that? By not just to throw music on or just take another ride, but man, let me think of some inquisitive questions to ask my kids while we're in the car for these 25 minutes, and it's more than just a commute to basketball practice, but it's this intentional time of hearing my son's heart, instilling values, connecting, and so on and so forth.
That's awesome, man. And you have a great balance, of all the things you're talking about now, and being very involved and having a business mindset. Todd the businessman, Todd the investor. We talk a lot about business and business aspirations. When you look at business and you look at the business you're creating, what inspires you when you think about business? What is your foundation, and where are you looking to take that?
That's a great question. I've always been passionate about business, even though I've been in ministry for over 15 years. I think a lot of it has to do with just a lot of my friends have always been in business spaces and business circles, so I've always just been exposed to it and been in those conversations. But I also believe that, Jesus was in the marketplace, and I know that could be weird or even controversial to think about, but, Jesus even being a carpenter, like we think about like, oh, that's a cool little hobby he had, but it's really not. It was actually a for-profit business that Jesus ran. He was a carpenter. He was helping build things that were serving people, making money, and sustaining himself and other people. So I think that there's a space for business. I view business as meeting needs, serving people. I heard this the other day. I thought it was so powerful. There's probably a lot of listeners and people in this space that would like this, but it was called the income formula. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but they were saying if you want to know how much income you're going to make, there's a very clear formula. It's 4 questions. And the first question was, what is the need for what you do? How well do you do what you do? How difficult is it to replace you? And how many people do you serve? Like, that really is going to determine the amount of value that you have, which is going to determine the amount of money that you're going to make.
That's awesome.
But it's really not about the money. It's about how many people can I serve? You know what I mean?
Amen.
And the people that are making the biggest difference and the people that are building the biggest companies are people that are serving a lot of people. I mean, think about Apple for a second. What is the vision of Apple? It's to have an Apple product in every home in the world. I mean,
that's a big vision.
That's a big vision. But what they're trying to do is they say we believe in the product, and we think that people are better for having the product. So we want every single person on the planet to have the product. Well, big vision, serving a lot of people, probably making a lot of money.
No doubt.
But I think the spiritual side of it is I just think there's a real place for marketplace ministry. I mean, even the late Billy Graham said he believed that the next greatest revival was going to come through the marketplace. I mean, think about that. He didn't say it was going to come through a church or through a revival or through a Christian concert. He said, I think the next greatest move of God is going to happen through the marketplace, which I really love that because I think, I grew up in a church setting where, you go to youth camp or you got a bunch of teenagers and they're like, all right, who wants to be used by God? Come up here to the front. We're going to pray for you. And then it's like, right here, we've got pastors and we've got evangelists and we've got missionaries.
Right.
Well, there's more than just those 3. You know what I mean? And I believe that God really wants, people in business, in fashion, in sports, in politics, because I just have that fundamental belief that God wants people everywhere because he wants to reach everyone.
Right.
So it only makes sense that he's raising people up, even in the marketplace, even in the business space. I've been looking at a guy like you and I'm like, you're pastoring your business. That's who you are. That's what you do. Your calling is just as important, just as vital, just as holy as me when I go to a church and I preach a sermon. To me, it's the exact same thing. Monday through Saturday, you're keeping your employees encouraged. You're speaking life into them, right? You're trying to draw out the best in them, trying to draw out the best in the company. And there's something powerful and pastoral about you doing that, And I think it's a really neat space for people to be in, and just a huge heart for business people. I think a lot of times they get lost in the shuffle of church, And I think they need to understand there's a way to connect their marketplace success to kingdom significance. Right. There's a way to do that.
And even mentoring, people who want to get into business. When I think about what you just said about, pouring into people, speaking life into people, and doing it in the marketplace, like that's been my calling. Like everyone's calling doesn't look the exact same. That's been my calling. It's to the business world and being a light inside of that world. So it's, it's awesome to hear you say that because the business people sometimes do get lost. Sometimes they get lost in their own mind, right? Like because business is such a grind, and it's vicious at times. You know what I mean? Like, as much as you want to like make it, you know, amazing or just service based, it doesn't always show up that way. You have to choose every single day that you're going to be a service minded, giver slash speak lifer. Because you can, that can get skewed or tainted in a New York minute, just based on the day-to-day functions of a business. I would say throughout the course of a day, more things go wrong than go right. I'm sorry. I mean, we're professional firefighters. I'm putting out fires constantly. So when you have victories and wins and, a successful hour, you should breathe that in. You know what I'm saying? Because, when I walk out of this podcast, this feels successful. When I walk out of this podcast room, there's going to be 15 things waiting for me. How many of them are good? How many of them are not? I don't know, Todd, but I know I've got to figure out how to, process that in my mind as a business person, as a believer, and then as business as a ministry, which is love people, serve people, have gratitude. It's a lot easier said than done. You have to fight for that.
Yeah.
Like you have to fight for victories.
Yeah.
So it's a strong point you make about that, because I deal with that every day. But at the end of the day, most days I go, did we try to do good by people today?
Yeah.
Right? Did a bus come down the street and we intentionally threw someone in front of a bus? We didn't. You know what I mean? Did we sow good seeds? Did we put seeds in the ground today? Did we pick up some of the harvest that came out of the ground today? And usually the answer is yes. So, from a blimp's eye view, you can actually look down and go, we're doing good things, maybe even great things. And it doesn't always show up day to day.
It doesn't.
But it does in the rear view, right? So
I'm curious, just to flip it and ask you a question, because I think it's a powerful thing of just you having the mentality of let me speak life in my company to my employees. You've been in the business space for a long time. How have you seen the difference of a businessman or woman who chooses to speak life and a businessman or woman who's not doing that?
I've been both. I've seen the difference in I mean. I can see it now much clearer than I could 10 years ago. Very easy, very simple, because we didn't always have values. You talk about your first year of marriage, you made values. Like, I'm impressed. I mean, we were flying by the seat of our pants, brother. We was praying to God every day we made it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we created values, which created a foundation. It created a strong or firm foundation, which allowed us to actually build something that is worth talking about, but also it allows probably anybody who works with me to go into something and see what your question is. Have you seen it good or have you seen it bad? The values created a foundation. No foundation, no building. Because when the wind blows, it falls, right? Strong foundation, you can put the right pillars in the ground, it creates vision. So we talk so much about values here that you can probably go in and spot something that's not working right. Again, not to be judgmental, because everyone's trying to find their way. Everyone's trying to figure out how to be better at something, right? So, it's probably easier to spot. And then I've been at different companies and seen different companies run like engines. And it's fascinating to watch and see a great leader, relish in what they've built. But it starts with foundation and values. It starts with values. Values aren't culture, but values set the tone for culture, right? And that's where you see companies that do unbelievable things, and you see some people that don't always get it right or get it wrong, and that's how it shows up typically. You
I
know?
love that. I love that.
Yeah. So those are things that we try to sow every day. But as you're a pastor. You've been on many pulpits, many stages. You've given many messages. When you think about sometimes, you travel to churches, you want to pull out maybe one of your better messages, or you want to pull out something that's really hit you or they need at that time. What's been a message that you've delivered that really still is still sowing seeds into that ministry?
Yeah. I mean, it is a funny thing being a pastor, being a preacher, and in a sense talking for a living, right? Like you get up, and I remember saying that to my wife, many years ago. I think this is when we were back in Brooklyn, and I was just like, man, I feel like every 2 to 3 days there's a microphone in my hand. And it was like that for like 10 plus years. Whether it's a setting like this, whether it's in front of 30 people, whether it's speaking to a staff, speaking to thousands, but I was always on a rhythm of like every 2 to 3 days, there was a microphone in my hand. And it was tough because I was like, this is a lot, like to always have something to say. And it's got to be interesting. It's got to be creative.
Right.
It's got to be theologically accurate. It's got to be timely. It's got to be funny. It's like, this is a lot. This is a lot.
Right.
So when I think about that question, there's so many different messages, that have been spoken, that I have spoken, but I think an underlying theme out of all of them is hopefully this sense of encouragement, right? Like once again, like even thinking about that notion of speaking life, right? The Bible says the words of the godly are life-giving. So it is my responsibility to give life every single time that I'm speaking, regardless of the message, regardless of the Bible character, regardless of the topic. Like people are in such desperate need of encouragement that they are longing for that. Like people are so down. They're so discouraged. They're so confused, man. And I think speaking life-giving words has become such a rarity that when you do it, it is like water to people's souls. So regardless of the topic or whatever the message is, I try to have something that is encouraging and that is uplifting and that tells people you can do this, you can make it. God is with you. Whatever you need can be found in him, And I think there's something really powerful about just simply encouraging people. I mean, when you break down the word encourage, it means to put courage in someone. Like I don't know if we've ever had a day where we were in more need of courage.
Wow.
The culture that we're in, and I think that we're in one of the biggest shifts of human history. I mean, it's just a time of change, right? Everything has shifted the last few years, culturally, financially, technologically, politically. I mean, everything that you can think of has shifted or is shifting. And it makes people feel very shaky, very uncertain, very timid, so there's never been a greater need, I think, to really speak life into people and encourage people. And it is powerful. I remember reading this study many years ago. There was an education program in San Francisco, and they went into this school, and they wanted to pilot this program for 6 months. They pulled in 10 teachers, like you're our 10 best teachers. And they pulled in 10 students. You're our 10 best students. We want to pilot this program for 6 months. They do it for 6 months. Everybody scored off the charts. They were blown away by the results. The company came in, they pulled the teachers aside, and they said, we have a confession to make. Those weren't the 10 best students. Those were just 10 random average students. Now the teachers are like feeling like pretty good about themselves. Like, wow, like we did really good, right? And then the guys were like, well, we have another confession to make. You're not the 10 best teachers. You're just 10 random average teachers that we chose. So then the question remained is if they were average teachers teaching average students, how did they get above average results? And the principle is very simple. It's when you treat people as they are, they stay as they are. But when you treat people for what they can become, they become that. That is the power of literally speaking life into people.
That's huge.
And it's so simple. Like I've never been the smartest guy in the room, but if you can just encourage, if you can just be positive, if you can just have hope, if you can just speak life into other people, it's amazing how much that sets you apart and how much further you'll get just by simply doing that. That's how rare it is. That's how needed it is.
Wow, that's so poignant, dude.
Yeah.
You know, we in one of our values, we have that. You know, we treat people not for who they are, but for who they can become.
I love that.
And it's just to hear that is extremely validating, but it's unreal. Like that's a study that was done. Like, wow,
Yeah.
that speaks volumes. It's not just, you know, a scenario that actually happened.
Yep.
So, dude, what do you, when you are planting these churches and you know, you have this ministry that, you know, you and Nicole are passionate about in Central America, how did you get involved in that and why is that so near and dear to your heart? Maybe you can give a little backdrop on it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an amazing organization called ICM that we came in contact with many years ago. We're friends with some of the board members and people that were involved in it. And the very long story short is it was actually started by a businessman who was a real estate guy who ended up retiring in his 60s, but still had a lot left in the tank. And he was like, I want to make a difference. I want to do something. He was traveling overseas. I think he was in India, and he found out the cost of building a church was only about $15,000 or something like that. And he was just blown away in his American mindset, you know, of money and what it cost. And, you know, in America, it might cost a million or two to build a church, plant a church. But over in India, it only cost about 15 grand to build
Wow.
a church. So he was like, we can do this. Here's a pastor. Here's a church. They've been meeting under a tree for how many years? They don't have a facility, you know, and if we can provide for them this building, it gives them a sense of dignity, and then it gives them a sense of credibility with the community. And then all of a sudden the gospel does what the gospel does, and people start to receive hope. So it's more than just a church and people coming in and singing songs. Now all of a sudden children are being fed, women are being empowered, medical needs are being met, and an entire community is starting to transform because of this local church. So this business guy, he started to rally up a bunch of his friends. His name was Dois Rosser, and he just started to, you know, say, hey, we can do something. We can make a difference. You got 15 grand, you got 15 grand. And they started building churches over in India, and they just kind of bootstrapped their way into becoming a legitimate nonprofit. And now today, they'll build about 1,000 churches a year, which is crazy. They're in over 100 different countries, and it's a well-oiled machine of just helping people in need and realizing that there's a lot of people that, you know, aren't even able to worship safely or legally in some countries without a building. And they're able to go over there and provide a structure and a building. So
That's awesome.
Nicole and I and a couple other families that we know, we decided to build a church over in El Salvador a couple years ago. We just got back a couple months ago, you know, visiting that church and going around and just seeing the work that's happening all over the country. And it's amazing, you know. And I think our heart behind that too is just God is bigger than the bubble that we live in. You know, we get so isolated and insulated in the bubble that we have. And I think we need to be, you know, faithful with the world that we kind of live in. But I also think that we have to live in a way that we see God is at work all over the world, you know. And even coming back to fatherhood, I want to raise my kids in that and have them have exposure that their world is just bigger than the bubble that they're in. You know, there's a big world. We serve a big God. There's a lot of needs. There's a lot of people. There's great vision. You know, so it's not just, oh, let's help somebody out, you know, through this organization. I think there's a bigger vision and a bigger plan of like, man, let's see how much we can do and how many families we can rally into this and not just do it for ourselves, but we're trying to build a legacy of kingdom impact with our family. That's kind of the goal, you know. So it's been really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, man, that's pretty cool, man. That's the impact is, you know, has serious reverberations across nations.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I think impact is the key word, right? I think everybody has a decision to make. What type of impact do you want to have? You know, and it's not about big or small. It's just what impact has God created you to make, you know? And I think we can easily just get up, go to our job, 9 to 5, do what we got to do, be in survival mode. And there are seasons for that. And I think there's also seasons to ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? Right? Because you blink and you're 30, you blink and you're 40, you blink and you're 50.
Right.
And, you know, I want to be able to do things that really make an impact. You know, I remember reading a study that really marked me many, many years ago. They did an analysis. They took about 100 people that were all 95 years old, all 95-year-olds. And they were all on their deathbed, nearing the end of their life, and they asked them what their greatest regret was. And out of all the 95-year-olds, the number one regret out of all of them was, I wish I would have done more things that outlasted me.
Wow.
It's powerful. It's really powerful, and it makes you think. You know what I mean?
does.
When you're younger or in the middle of your life, and say, okay, like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? And what impact am I making? And how will this make a difference? You know, there's a Bible verse that I think is great for all people, but definitely business people. It says, you know, a man's glory, riches, and power will one day fade away. A man's glory, riches, and power will one day fade away. So when I read that, I think, well, I want to do things that don't fade away. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want to get so obsessed with these things that feel
fade,
important to me, but eventually they fade away.
Fade away.
So how do I give my life to stuff that doesn't fade away?
That's so impactful.
You know?
Dude, this has been great, man. I appreciate you, you know, taking time out of your day to jump on with us. When you think about a harvest, you know, a harvest you're believing for tomorrow. What harvest are you believing for tomorrow?
It's a great question. I think about my family. I think about kingdom impact. You know, I think about kids and grandkids, and you know, I've referenced a lot of like, oh, this 80-year-old told me, or this 95-year-old study, right? Like, I think about, you know, being at the end of my life and being in a place of fulfillment and happiness, and saying like, hey, man, I ran the race. Like, I did what God asked me to do, you know, and it wasn't perfect, and there was a lot of bumps, you know, along the road, but I've done this thing, and I have, you know, done it faithfully, I think, and successfully. I think that's the goal, you know. But the harvest is it's a step of faith, because like I said, man, all we can do is sow those seeds, you know. And I think that's the encouragement for today, because every day we got to wake up and we got to do something, you know. And I think just encouraging people that are listening right now, you know, there's another verse that says, those who watch the wind will not plant. Those who look at the clouds will not reap. This is a great verse. This is a great verse for procrastinators and perfectionists, which I can be both of those things. And basically what that verse is saying is those who look at the wind will not plant, those who look at the clouds will not reap, is saying if you're waiting for perfect conditions, you're going to be waiting your entire life. Like, we can talk ourselves out of things. We can wait. We can overanalyze. We can do all this type of stuff. And there comes a point in time where it's like, you just got to do it. You just got to go for it. You just got to take the step. You just got to make the call. You just got to fill out the application. You just got to make the decision. Like, there is that element, you know, and I think we're very much on that journey.
Yeah,
like,
man.
I don't even know if we know what the harvest is going to completely look like, but it's like, let's go for it. Let's do our part, you know, and see what happens.
I love it, man. This is very impactful, very insightful. There's a lot of seeds in here that will definitely germinate and rest in people's souls and in their minds for years and years and years, man. You're a book of wisdom, and it's been an honor to have you on. Good friend, Pastor Todd Cruz. Appreciate you, man. Love you so much.
Awesome. Love
bro,
you too,
and your
man.
family.
Thanks for today. It's been incredible.
Thanks for coming in, brother. God bless you all for listening. We're going to try to keep bringing value to you, keep bringing amazing guests like Todd, who just live their lives from a place of service and are encouragers. We hope that you've been encouraged today. Continue to speak life.